For a series that is now infamous for being gratuitously violent and gory, it speaks highly of the value of life. As the world is slowly and sparingly revealed, we learn more about the value of human life. In fact, I would argue that, thus far at least, the main theme of Invincible is the value of human life. This all seems extremely counterintuitive if you watch the show on at least a very superficial level, but I really do believe this is true. So I guess this all just means I have my work cut out for me. The catalyst for all of this being our main character. Being both human and Viltrumite, Mark Grayson contains the genetics of both Nolan Grayson and Debbie. Ever since he was a child, he embodied the best and most pure things humanity has to offer. He is good-natured, sympathetic, and mentally resilient. As a child, we see his determination and raw moments of human joy impacting his parents, particularly Nolan. We see his humanity persist even as a teenager. In the very first scene we see him in, we are made privy to how stubbornly he sticks up for those who are in a place of weakness. Amber was getting bullied by Todd, and Mark decides to help her, even while he's weaker, and even against the advice of William. Mark's spirit is charged by an indomitable force that refuses to yield even against the worst of evils, as we will discuss later. The only difference that transpires after he gets his powers is that now he not only has the will to do good, but he actually has the strength to carry it out on a serious scale. Mark's words account for little unless he has the power and strength to back it up. Mark shows that great power doesn't necessarily mean that there will be abuse and domination. Power can and should be used for the beneficence of others. This goes in direct contrast with Omni-Man at the beginning of the series, and of course against the Viltrum Empire. No matter if the species could be perceived as inferior or superior, life is worth protecting as a real, conscious experience. Nowadays, everyone prefers dark, gritty, and morally mixed heroes. You would think that a gory series like Invincible would lean into this a lot more than it does, but to my surprise, it does it quite sparingly. It shows how even in the face of wicked evil, you can still be strong and be a paragon of virtue. Mark's character does face some moral dilemmas, but it's not as though he's ever giving up on his core morals and trying to save as many people as possible. The dark and morally confusing and conflicted character certainly has its place, but the paragon of virtue does as well. What Mark shows is the real consequences of choosing good in a heartless world. He believes in something, and nothing will deter him from that, but he faces real consequences for doing so. He isn't able to keep his work and relationship life balance. He's always late or even unable to meet Amber, and for doing so, he gets utterly thrashed in fights. This makes his life harder, but he refuses to back down from his principles. He cries and moans at most of the life lost due to his physical inferiority. But what you will never see him do is back down. Despite being called invincible, he's actually extremely vulnerable. So far, every time he's in a conflict, with rare exceptions, he loses. In a sort of callback to his first scene, Mark, while having the heart of gold, lacks the strength compared to other Viltrumites to enact his will against them, just like his inferiority against Todd in the beginning. But as Invincible got his powers, he became impenetrable. If we are to use the end of Season 2 Part 1, I think he will learn to be a bit more ruthless like his father later on, although that's just my speculation. I haven't finished the comics yet. Even if he doesn't literally lose all the time, it is as though he does. He has constant girl problems with Amber and accidentally kills innocent people. At some point in episode 6 of season 1, he gets somewhat depressed and kinda gives up on the whole superhero thing for a bit. This leads to the very real consequence of William's crush being in danger and him not doing anything about it. But despite all his setbacks and everything pulling him against doing his duty, he ultimately chooses to embrace it regardless. Despite everything, he chooses and embraces unflinching love and humility. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." Mark's anchor in this storm is his love for humanity. It's his driving force that keeps him grounded and guides his actions. What makes Mark invincible is his heart. Mark has a metaphorical heart of gold, but you can wear actual gold by using today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Forge London. Use my code APOLLY to get 20% off all jewelry. That's UPAULI to get 20% off all jewelry. Studies have shown it also gives you a 20% higher chance of manifesting Viltrumite genes when you grow up. Link in the description. Okay, so here's where I really have my work cut out for me. With Mark, it's quite easy to understand how humanity persists, but with Omni-Man, it isn't so clear. Nolan Grayson has lived for thousands of years, but his 20-year stint on Earth has made such profound reverberations in his heart. Much of what makes Mark's character is how he changes the world around him, and this is no more clear than with his dad. Presumably, in order to ingratiate himself better into human society, Nolan gets a wife and manages to have a child. That child, Mark Grayson, was such a raw and personal demonstration of human innocence, it makes this 1,000-year-old man working for a tyrannical empire feel human joy for the first time. We see him watch his weakling son during a baseball game, and he stands on the side in discontent. As Debbie talks to him and shows him the true beauty and sacredness of human life, he begins to cheer. In a bonus scene in the Adam Eve special, Nolan arrives late at home to see Mark put duct tape all over himself and call himself Duct Tape Man. This is one of the best scenes in the show in my opinion, and very few people have seen it. While his family is there, Nolan feigns laughter and love, but as soon as the family turns their back towards him, he fiercely pursues them, only to stop momentarily and realize what he's doing. Nolan loves his family and everything about them. These moments show a spark of humanity growing in Nolan. Nolan was raised to despise weakness, and that's all his family was. Weak child and weak mother who decides to coddle that weak child. Debbie says that he would love Mark the same whether he had powers or not, but this does not compute with Nolan's might makes right background. As a Viltrumite, he shouldn't hesitate to kill them and start over considering how bad they would be for the Viltrum Empire. But he stops. Something inside of him realized how monstrous it would be to kill his own family, and so he stopped. Not only does he stop, but he puts his hand on his head and deeply regrets what he was about to just do. Humanity has given him a new sense of compassion and love for his family on a planet that was just supposed to be an assignment to him. Humans, particularly his wife and kid, taught him about empathy and joy, and although his character arc is far from complete, we see humanity penetrate his military training in these scenes. Nolan was raised on planet Viltrum, raised with the unquestioning belief that they were the greatest empire in the universe. Nolan was committed to doing his part to violently make it the only empire in the universe. Due to their strength and long lifespan, they see themselves akin to a god species. To regular humans like us, they might as well be eternal and all-powerful, omnipotent and omnipresent, Omni-Men if you will. As the show unfolds, we see Mark get his powers and this changes everything for Nolan. What Nolan was probably planning on doing after he got attached to his human life was to wait for his family to die a normal human life, outlive them, then he would slaughter the Guardians of the Globe, and perhaps the rest of the human race after. But with his son getting powers, he wouldn't be the only Viltrumite around anymore. His own kin has the chance to rival him, and so he has to train and indoctrinate him slowly into the Empire. Really what he should have done as a Viltrumite is to kill him before he gets too strong to become an actual threat, but at this point his humanity was too strong. So he starts by killing the Guardians and leaving subtle clues to Debbie and Mark in order to assuage the ultimate betrayal. He allows Debbie to find his bloodied suit in order to soften up the fact that he may not be the person he says he is. With Mark, he gave him flashing glimpses of Viltrumite training and let him see the people die in his own hands. In episode 7 of season 1, Nolan was practicing how he would tell Mark about his lineage, which reinforces what I was saying. He has a sworn duty to Viltrum, but he also has a child who would not be on board. His conversation with Cecil showed how he was reaffirmed and resolute in his ultimate goal, but he was still somewhat oscillating between family and duty. Regardless, he has a duty and uses this opportunity to make a last push to solidify it. This begins his bloodbath. Despite his duty, he ultimately sees his son's dying face, his dying breaths, and asks him what he would have in 500 years, after all of his family and friends are long gone. Mark softly states, "I'd have you." His memory of the baseball game and this demonstration of Mark's humanity are the final pieces in turning him over to the human side. It causes him to run away and softly cry in the distance. A train full of dead bodies didn't matter to him. but seeing his son say those words after everything he did to him did mean something. No, it didn't just mean something, it meant everything. Despite having all the power in the world, he was powerless in the face of his own emotions. I described the conflict before as a bloodbath, but really it was a battle. It was a battle between Mark and Nolan's beliefs, a battle between humanity and savagery. It was Nolan trying to convince Mark of the Viltrumites, and Mark trying to convince Nolan of the humans. It wasn't just punches or buildings being blown up. These were all efforts to convince one to the other. The end goal wasn't for Nolan to beat up his son, but was to convince him to his side. Human life is frail and worthless. Just let those people die. Who cares about that building? Just let it crumble and let people die. In fact, I'm gonna grab your head and force you to witness just how frail and insignificant human life really is. Nolan tells himself all of this to no avail. The things he said about his wife weren't actually honest. They were really just things he had repeatedly told himself in order to carry out his mission. She was his first insight into humanity. They had a child and raised Mark as a human, to be like his wife. He felt genuine, childlike joy watching Mark get a home run. He was really, truly proud of him. One part of him was telling him that he just wanted to buy time and see if the DNA would mix. Another part of him genuinely enjoyed it. This culminates into that last scene, where he sits there, still, the same child, only now a Viltrumite. His teeth are even knocked out in the same places. He came to humanity to destroy humans, but became human despite his best efforts. This entire episode is Nolan doing everything in his power to reject his humanity, only for Invincible, the paragon of humanity, to make him human in the end. In trying to convince Mark to his side, Mark convinces him to his. Nolan looks at his bloodied hands, and for the absolute time, he chooses to let his human side make the ultimate decision to leave Earth, shedding a few tears on his way out. A Viltrumite would have looked at the boy and felt nothing, but he was devastated. He thought that his human side was an act. He thought that he could play human, mess around a bit, and feel nothing afterwards. But in reality, it was the Viltrumite side that was the act. As he further ingratiated himself in human culture, he was becoming so authentically human that the Viltrumite side that he was bred and grown up with was the part that was becoming the real act. He was pretending to be a human until he was no longer pretending. It was as though he put on the mask of humanity and accidentally had his face fitted to the mask without knowing. After causing all that havoc to try and convince himself that he doesn't want anything to do with humanity, it is humanity in its most raw and unmarred form that he leaves with. Understanding now that he can't go back to Earth or Viltrum, he wanders around, drifting aimlessly in space. He's ready to self-delete himself until he finds a group of ants in danger and saves them and takes them back to their home. After doing this, he's elected their leader. These ants, literal ants, are nothing compared to Viltrumites. Their lifespan is only about 9 months and they break the moment you touch them. By Viltrumite logic, they would be completely useless, yet Omni-Man, someone who might as well be a god to them, cares for them so deeply, demonstrating his dramatic character development. The lives of the Thraxen are valuable, not because of their strength or length, but because they are a conscious, intelligent species. The conscious experience is worth protecting because those experiences are valuable no matter the length or developmental period. Life is valuable not as far as it is useful, but as far as it is life. Nolan, up to meeting the Thraxens, had led a vacuous, empty life. This is emblematic of the Viltrum life. But the Thraxens, despite living shorter, live teeming with gratitude. The fact that, or perhaps because of the fact that they lived the exact opposite life of a Viltrum, really told Omni-Man all he needed to know. This is why I believe that despite a surface level analysis revealing the fact that it's very violent and gory, and despite the fact that you see people being brutally killed all the time, Invincible is actually a passionate story about the value of life. That life has intrinsic dignity, that life is an emotional and personal experience no matter the strength or length, and why it is worth cherishing those experiences for its own sake. I mentioned all of this without mentioning the robot story or the Molar twins. Perhaps that's best saved for another video. Thank you all for watching. Omni-Man has been one of my favorite characters to come out in recent media, and I'm so glad I'm able to talk about him. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you all next time. Peace.